Okay, what is up, you guys? So I have this PRS that I just restrung, and obviously it's in tune. It's in the tune to Q sharp. So if we go ahead and plug in the guitar, if my tuner will stay. So if we tune it all the way up, we're going to notice one thing right off the bat. It's not going to stay in tune real well. And why will it not set up real well or stay in tune? Well, it's because the bridge is not set correctly. So if we unplug it and we look down, so how do we fix this? And then if we look over here, why is it at such a weird angle? Like, there's probably over 1/4 of an inch here, but the tail is pretty much touching the top of the guitar. Why would our bridge look like this? And why do I see so many bridges that look like this on PRSs? Well, it's essentially because Paul created the best bridge that you could ask for, but not everyone knows how to properly set them up or learn how to properly set up their bridge. So we'll go ahead and get the strings off, but a little bit about PRS bridges. So growing up, I listened to a bunch of videos about Paul describing and explaining his creation of this bridge. And essentially, he knew that Floyd Roses, when done correctly, could stay in tune. But sometimes Fender Strats, the Strats never really wanted to stay in tune that well, but they had the 6-point. So what he created is a 6-point, meaning 6 screws, 6 different points for the bridge to connect. But he took the knife edge manufacturing idea from the Floyd Rose and installed it onto his 6 screws. So the screws that you use on a PRS bridge is unlike any other screw that you'll use. Fender is just a generic flathead screw that screws down, and it's just like any other screw, essentially. These, if you were to pull it out, and I'll try to get one out of my parts bin and get a good up-close picture of it. It's essentially the inside of an hourglass. So it's going to come in and have a notch inside of the screw. And the bridge sits inside of that notch. And then that allows you to have why everyone loves the PRS bridge for fluttering. It's because you have those 6 knife edge screws, so it gives you a very smooth and stable bridge, and it also stays in tune really well. Unfortunately, a lot of bridges look like this on the PRSs I've encountered over the years. They're either way too high in the front and really low on the back, or the front's maxed out, and sometimes it starts to rise here on this little notch here, and it starts to lift the bridge up. So being a touring tech, while I don't always completely redo the setups of guitars when they're given to me by the artist, sometimes I have to fix a guitar if it's just not going to work for the show. Or if they say, hey, I've been having a lot of issues with this guitar, can you check it out? And I created this toolkit I'm about to show you, and I decided when the 3D printer world came around and I was able to get my hands on one, I wanted to start releasing some of the products that I've made. So this is the refined version of the version I used to make out of an old pick guard. So essentially we have 2 gauges for your bridge height. We have a short leg for guitars, think like PRS EG, that has the pick guard. And then we have this fuller length, or full leg, for your traditional PRS guitar. And then you have your screw depth gauge. And this is probably the most useful piece of the whole kit, because this works whether you want to float your guitar or if you want your bridge to be hardtailed. So I'm going to show you both systems. First, we're going to go ahead and do have it float, and then I'll show you how to hardtail it. But I created these kits so that it makes it, one, a lot easier for me on the road to set up a PRS so that I can get back to other duties that I have on the road than spending a few hours fixing this. And I decided to release it to the public. So here's what we're going to do. First things first, let's get these strings off. Okay, so when I take the strings off, I line up the tuning post hole with the nut slot. So it saves me a little bit of time when I go to put the strings back on. And then we just loosen the thumb screw. And then the strings will come right out. And then we'll slide them out the back. And then the strings will be set off to the discard pile. Now, let's focus on the bridge. So, before we get too crazy with the bridge, we want to do a few things first. First thing is we're going to take some tape and we're going to rub it across our shirt. I prefer the lowest tack masking tape that I can find. Now when we place it on, I want to be able to have the holes open so we can restring it with the tape on. And then we're going to do a piece on the side just to kind of help pull down the bridge. So your bridge should look something like this now. Now we're going to go ahead and flip the guitar over, and make sure if you have a trem arm, make sure you remove that before we tape it up. We're going to flip it over, and using the appropriate head screwdriver, we're going to loosen the trem claw. And we're going to loosen the claw till all tension is off the springs. And then, in my world of different types of screwdrivers and pliers and all types of fun stuff, we're going to grab this 90-degree angle pair. It's a little more than 90, but it does the job. So the reason I like these is because a traditional pair of pliers where they come up and down, you're going to have to grip here and pull it back. And I've seen so many PRSs with massive gouges, actually any guitar with a trem. I've seen gouges all here and up here and sometimes off to the side from where people are trying to maneuver the springs and the tool slips and they just eat the guitar up. So the nice thing with these is you can slide under and you can just lift that spring right out. And then when you go to reinstall them, you can pull it out and slide it in, and if you slip, if you damage the top, it'll be a lot less than a normal pair of pliers. So we went ahead and we removed the springs, and the top is taped because we don't want the bridge flopping around when we take the springs off and loosen them. We don't want the bridge to be able to bang up against the top and mess up your guitar. So that's why we taped it before we touched any of that. Now I do want it to float. So we're going to lift the tape up. And for this one, because it is a normal size PRS, we're going to slide the full caul underneath. Now it's important to note that if you can see here, there's a little bit of a slant, and that's to give the backside a little bit thicker material to kind of robust the material up a little bit. So just make sure that when you push it in that the bridge doesn't touch that ramp. And they're going to go ahead and put the tape back. Now, we're going to take a screwdriver that appropriately fits the bridge, and we're going to lift the screws up. I pull the screws out to where they're about halfway to the top of the saddle. So as long as they're either in the halfway point or to the top of the saddle, they're pulled out enough. And what this allows us to do is to correctly set the screws. Now, if you look, you might be able to tell On the video you won't be able to tell, but in person you'll be able to see how it slopes down with a flat spot. And that's the knife edge I was talking about. That's what we want to set. So that's where this comes into play. So we're going to slide the gauge onto the bridge. And now, even though we have the bridge taped and the caul and the bridge should not move, I still like to hold my hand on the bridge to ensure that it doesn't rock. And then we'll lower each screw till it barely kisses the gauge. So that makes it a little tough to pull out. Right there, just kisses it. You know what, we'll go back down a little bit. And then we'll bring this piece down. Just a little taut. Okay. And then we'll lower each screw till it just kisses the top of the bridge. So this G screw needs to come down a little bit more. Perfect, that is where we want it. And then if you push the bridge forward, you should see it slides into all of the notches perfectly. Now, let's say we wanted to hardtail the bridge. Essentially, we would have done the same thing, but instead of placing this under it, we would have pressed the bridge all the way down to the body. We would have taped it up, and we would have used the gauge to get the heights correctly. And then we would have removed the gauge, and then you would have continued on with the rest of the setup process. But because we're because we're floating it and not hardtailing it, there's going to be a little bit more steps involved with this. Okay, so while the bridge is still taped, we're going to go ahead. So even if you were flat tail or hardtailing it, you're still going to leave the bridge taped. And we're going to flip over. And I'm going to bring the claw down a little bit more. And then I'm going to reinstall the springs. Now, the thing is with springs is usually you can get away with 3 of them. I am tuning this to drop C with 11 to 52 strings. So it's going to be a little bit more tension, so you want the extra spring. Now, if you do 3 springs, I prefer to do them all straight up. Unless I need the extra tension, then you can bring them in. The reason guys do the 3 springs where you connect these 2 posts to the outer is because you're increasing the length of the spring, so you're making the spring work a little harder. I prefer to keep them all straight up and down. I'd rather have 4 in here than 3 at diagonals, but every guitar is different, so you kind of just got to play around with the spring. I would always say set your guitar up to what the guitar has in it, and then if you have to change course, then we can change course. But it's best to start off with a grounding point. And most of the time, if you're playing 10s in standard tuning or 11s a whole step down, you should be fine. So that's just a little bit about springs. We're going to leave them where they're at. We're going to go ahead and flip the guitar over. And I'm going to push down and make sure that the bridge goes back into the knife edges of the screws. Now it's time to restring. So we're going to go ahead and grab our strings. Now, I like to do it all at once, so I'm going to flip the guitar over. Okay, now we can lift the guitar up, pull the strings all the way through, make sure they've seated, or they're through here so they're seated inside, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to restring the guitar. So for PRS phase 2 or phase 3, you're going to pull the string all the way through, and then you're going to tighten the thumb wheel down. And then I like to pull it to give it a little bit of a notch. So pull the string through and tighten it. I did tighten the low E a little bit too taut, so that's kind of give it a little bit more tension like what we're seeing right here. And the reason I pull them off to the side is just a personal thing. Okay. And now we're going to go ahead and tighten them. So grabbing a flathead. You don't want to get them to where it gets tight. You just want to get it to where it kind of gets snug. Because if you over tighten these, you can easily snap the string. And we don't want that. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and tune the guitar to pitch. I'm sorry, close to pitch. We're just going to get, essentially what we want is just some tension on the springs here. Okay, so every string actually has some tension on it. And if you look, you can see that the bridge is starting to rise up, and that's totally fine. This is where adding tension to the springs comes into play. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to bring the claw all the way to the body. Now at this point, if we lift the tape up, the bridge should be pulled all the way against the call. If it is not, this is the time where we will add an extra spring or redo the configuration on the back. Also, this is the point that if you're hardtailing the bridge straight to the body, as long as this is connected to the body, that's as far as we're going to go with the bridge if you're hardtailing it. So if you're someone who wanted your bridge to be hardtailed to the body, this is the process where when I show you how to remove this, you don't have to worry about anything else as far as the claw goes. Because as long as the bridge is firm against the body, you're solid. You can finish the setup process along with us just ignoring anything about the floating. For those of us who are floating it, like I said, if the bridge is making not making full contact and it's rising up a little bit, and we only have the 3 springs, this is when we could do the 2 here to here, or we could add a 4th spring in. And now we're going to tune to pitch. Now we want to look and make sure that the bridge is still sitting in the screws, and they are. And the reason, no matter whether we're floating it or hardtailing it, the reason that I do the process that I went through, where we put the springs on half tension, put the strings on, get them to where they're making a note but they're not tuned to pitch, and then bring in the springs all the way back, is so that we can save some tension on these springs, because it's really bad for you to push down the bridge from, if it's resting on the top of the screws, to go down into the notch. That's how you break your screws off. So trying to slowly bring everything up to tension will save your screws, and it'll make it to where you don't have a PRS with 4 or 5 actual working bridges or screw bridges, which I have seen a lot. Okay, so now that we're close to pitch, the bridge is still solid against the call. Again, if it's rising up, even at this point, if it's rising up, that's when you can change your spring configuration. So next thing I want to do is I want to stretch the strings. Now, being locking tuners, I don't like to yank on them too hard because I have had them slip out. So I'll just give them a little bit of a lift. And we're kind of going in between the pickups, around the 12th fret or so, and then like around the 5th fret. Just trying to stretch them all the way across. And while I'm doing so, I'm holding my hand at the nut, pressing down so that when the string comes up, it just comes straight up and down, and not side to side, so we don't break our nut. Okay, retune. Okay, so this is when we would set the relief. Now, if you watch some of my other videos, I have a whole tutorial on showing you how to set up relief, and I've got new videos coming on that. But we're going to do it quickly. And I'm happy with where that relief is at. Now, I'm going to go ahead, still in tune, I'm going to stretch them again. Now, you might not be able to see it with the camera because my hand is in the way, but what I'm doing with my fingers is I'm just lifting them up a couple of times, just quickly to kind of add some tension to the string. Tune back to pitch. Now, this is going to be a new product announcement because now we're to the point that we can set our action. One of the things with setting up action is when you're doing it in a dark arena, dark stadium, wherever you're at, sometimes it's really hard to see my numbers on my ruler. Because my ruler is just one of these guys. You can buy them from the luthier company named on it. So I have my metric and I have my American one. So it's hard to read the numbers. And yes, I carry around my little visor with the lights, but I don't really love using it because I've always got a bunch of stuff going on and all of that. So I created a system. I can't put that back, so I'll just hold it there. Create a system to where I only have to get the outer 2 strings in place, and then everything else will kind of fall in. So what we're going to do is unplug in the guitar. We're going to set it in playing position, and I'm going to measure the high E, or in this case, my D string, because I'm tuning to drop C. So what I want to do is I want to lower this saddle till I hit 3/64. One important thing to do when you're lowering your saddle height is to make sure that you do it evenly and that the saddle is parallel to the body. You want it to be perfectly flat, because if it's cocked at any angle like this string here, that can cause some tuning stability with the other strings around it. And I always hold at the 1st fret. So we're at 3. And I'm going to raise this one to be to 4. We're going to lower it a little bit more. And I'm measuring at the 12th fret. Okay, so we have 3 to 4/64, which is exactly where I want to be. Now, how can we ensure that these will all fall into place? Well, simple. Let's go ahead and retune. We're going to want to lower what is our drop CC, and then the D's got to come up a little bit. So if you use the traditional radius gauges that you can buy on the market, they don't completely work as well as you would love, because essentially you're creating a double radius. So if we find our 10-inch radius, which is what this PRS is, and we draw our 10-inch radius, and then we come up a little bit, and we draw another 10-inch. Right here it don't look too bad, but if we extend them all the way out, essentially what we're going to have is we're going to have 2 circles that overlap, and you're going to have more thickness on the top than on the sides. So what I created was a radius gauge where if you measure off your 10, it will always remain a perfect circle around. So being the nerd that I am, I figured out what the PRS radius is with the average height of fret wire, with the recommended space between the top of the fret and the bottom of the string, and the thickness that PRSs usually use on each string. I added all that together and I created 6 different radius for each string. And then in CAD, I was able to connect each string radius together, and I created this. So just to test out my theory if I got correct on this or not, I took it to my Wood Library 594, set it on the bridge, and it was perfect. So even their guitars from the factory match this, or at least the one example of a guitar from the factory that I haven't touched the bridge, it was this radius. So what we'll do is we'll place it between the bridge and the pickup, and we're going to pluck the string. So what that's telling me is the high E is lower than all the others because it rung out freely, but none of the others did. So we're going to lower all the screws, and we're going to lower them, I would say, a decent amount, because what we're wanting is to start off with is the 2 outer strings to touch. and they do. So now let's work on the next pair. Okay, so while we watch, we're going to raise this up, making sure that these two outer strings are parallel. So remember, the thicker side goes to the treble and the more narrow side goes on the bass. So we're going to raise the B up a little bit, and we're going to raise up the A a couple. Okay, so the B is solid. Now let's raise up the A. Okay, so the A is really low, so we're going to go ahead and bring it up a decent amount. A little bit more, we're getting close. Okay, now we're going to go to the middle pair, which are both really low. So we're going to raise them up just a tiny bit more. Okay, so now that all the strings are touching, and we're going to go ahead and improve that again. Okay, so we should be set up to where when we tune it up, everything should feel solid. Now, just to confirm, nothing changed with everything back to tension. Let's test it again. Okay, everything sounds where it should. And then if we feel it, everything feels really good. And now if you want to use your roller to kind of fine tune or feel for fine tune, that's fine as well. I use the radius gauge to get me where I want to be in a hurry, and it gets me very, very, very close to where the guitar should be at. And honestly, this feels exactly where I would want it anyway. But these are now available on my website. They also can come in a set with the PRS bridge, and I also will have these coming out in different radiuses. I've just got to check a few more on guitars that I have here to make sure that the formula is right, but there should be others coming for other radiuses. This is only for a 10-inch radius. So if you have the PRS Silver Sky or the Dusty Warren, I believe, the one with the Floyd, any of those, this probably won't be your best bet, but any of the PRSs with a 10-inch radius, this is your guy. Okay, so went ahead, we set relief, we set action. Let's give them another stretch. Okay, and then we're going to tune up to pitch. Okay, so everything is where it should be. When we stretch it, they didn't stretch out that much. We can go ahead and set pickup height, which I always hold it in playing position, press on the last fret, and then I measure from the highest point of the pickup to the bottom of the string. These kind of live close to where I want them to be, so I'm really not going to worry about them too much. And now we can pull the tape off. Regardless of what position you are setting your guitar up in, we can peel the tape off now. And the bridge should still be completely firm against either A, the body, or B, your gauge. Okay, so before we get to balancing the bridge, the reason that I do the method the way I do it is when I'm working on the road, Like for the artist I'm working with right now, we have a bunch of MIDI connections. Our MIDI rack has 4 MIDI controllers in the rack. I have a controller, he has a controller, and controls and changes all this crazy MIDI. We have different amps, we have different pedals. It's just a very complicated rig. And if something's going wrong with it, if I plug in one day and I'm getting no signal, and I check the obvious, pack sunk to the correct channel, making sure there's no big air gaps, making sure the sine cables are plugged in for my racks and all of that, as long as the quick dummy check look over is okay, then I go, you know what, it's a bigger issue than just something's not plugged in or something like that. Let's take my guitar and I'll grab a cable and I'll go guitar, cable, amp head. I'll just plug straight into the amp. And if it works, then I know there's something in the channel, and I slowly start to add stuff in until I figure out where there's a problem. Essentially the same thing as what I did here. I know that the springs and the strings can be a problem together, so I eliminated the springs altogether. And that's for floating it, that's why I came up with this system, right? Essentially, right this moment, you have a hardtail PRS, because this has created it to be a hardtail. So everything sets up as normal. You're able to do your relief, your action, your pickup height. You can even dial in your intonation. Roughly, you can do your nut height. Whatever you want to do, you can do it now. And the springs are taken out of the equation. Floating a bridge is 2 forces. It's tension between the springs and the strings. If the strings have too much tension, it will lift the bridge up, causing everything to go flat. If the springs have too much tension, it will pull the bridge downward, causing everything to go sharp. Now, the reason I like to load the springs with tension as we are right now versus the strings is springs can be in your guitar for 10, 15 years and be fine, right? They're not going to really, they'll stretch out, but they're not going to stretch out as much as your guitar strings. So I wanted to carefully bring the strings to the same tension the springs are going to be. Meanwhile, leaving the strings alone, because the string tension can vary so much because they're just easier to stretch, right? So we got rid of the spring tension by decking the bridge, and we did everything with the strings. And the reason I've been stretching is I don't want the strings to stretch while the springs are back in the equation. So before we start the final step, we're going to stretch these strings again. Because it's literally a fulcrum point, and it's a balancing act, getting both of them to be able to be at the same tension and to float together. If any of those are off, you will have a lot of issues. And I think that's one reason why a lot of guys are intimidated by Floyds, and a lot of guys don't love setting up their bridges to float. Okay, so let's go ahead and plug in and let's check our tuning. Now, I don't have any with me because I'm prepping all my stuff at the locker to get ready to go out on the road. And I'm filming this in January, and this is kind of like my kind of slow time. So I've got a shipment of stuff to restock me, and part of that is some Big Ben's nut sauce. But essentially what I would do at this step is I would lift the string out of the slot, and I would add some lubrication to each slot. Whether it's just graphite from a pencil, whether it's the lizard spit graphite stuff they have, which is phenomenal, or the Big Ben's, whatever you prefer, just lube up the nut slot a little bit and make sure the string is moving freely. And then from there, we'll stretch it one more time. Okay, so the C is still stretching, so we're going to work on this for a second. so the C is close enough. So we're going to set it in playing position, still plugged in. And we're going to tune it to pitch. Okay, we can unplug, and now we're going to feel the gauge. The gauge is very firm underneath of the bridge. Let me readjust the camera so you can see better. We're going to feel for the gauge, and it is firmly underneath the bridge, so it is not moving. So, grabbing a Phillips head screwdriver, we're going to do about a half a turn to loosen it. And we're going to check the gauge. Still no movement. Now we are going to go ahead and pull it out, because it was starting to rise up just the slightest bit on the back end. So we went ahead and pulled it out. Okay, now let's check the tuning. Now, this step is very important. You do not check, or you do not adjust the tuning at this step with the tuners. These are no longer in the equation. Forget they even exist. We're gonna do it by the claw. And to make it a little bit easier, I'm going to switch my cable around. Okay. So, we're going to check the C, and we're at C sharp. We're really sharp. So we're going to loosen the claw. We're going to do another half rotation. And we're going to check it. So now, we're a little, just a wee bit flat across the board, so we're going to screw it back in just the tiniest amount. So what, because the lower side is sharp and the treble side is going flat, we're just going to lower or loosen the bass side just the tiniest amount. Okay, so we're going to loosen it just a little bit more. Just the tiniest of a turn. And we're pretty much in. So at this point, we can stretch the strings out one more time. Then we will retune it. And then we should be solid, but we'll test it. So let's go ahead and stretch the strings. Okay. Now we're going to grab our arm. We're going to place our arm back into the guitar. We're going to go down a little bit. And then we're going to come up. And it returns exactly to perfect pitch all the way across. So that essentially is how you set up your PRS. Now, sometimes you'll have a guitar that fights you a little bit. The first thing I will always say, if you followed all of my steps to a T, and maybe there's a string or two that's going super sharp or super flat, first thing I would check is your nut slots. While I don't recommend opening up the slots on your own if you don't have practice or know how to properly do it, leave that for a professional, but doing the nut slots, opening them up can help a lot with that. And then sometimes check in for burrs or issues on the saddle can help. Also, if you loosen the string and you just put a little bit of lubrication right there on the saddle point, sometimes that can help as well. But usually if there's a sticking point and one or two strings is being an issue, it's up here in the nut. Just a FYI. And the reason we adjust with the claw is because when we block the claw off, or the springs off, everything up here is set properly. The only thing that's not is back here on the claw. So as we loosen it, we only want to adjust the claw because this is the only thing we haven't that we haven't brought into the equation. And then you'll get it to the point where it should float perfectly. And then you adjust the claw to, if the strings are pulling up, that means the claw needs to be tightened because everything's going flat. If the bridge is pulling back and everything's sharp, it means there's still too much tension on the springs. So that's how you set up your PRS guitar. Please check out my website, links below. If you love what you see, please leave a comment, go pick up a set. Thank you, and please subscribe.